to this wonderful event in the afternoon, the Academic Senate's 2023 Distinction in Mentoring and Teaching Award Celebration. I'm Meg Walhagen. I'm currently the chair of the Academic Personnel Committee, or better known as CAP. We're really honored in some ways to be able to host, if you will, the Academic Senate Distinguished Faculty Awards that recognize exceptional teaching mentoring for UCSF faculty. And I think when you hear from our nominees and so forth, you will understand that we have an exceptional group here, faculty here at UCSF. The Distinction in Teaching Award, just as some background, was established as early as 1958. And every year we recognize exceptional Senate faculty members who've shown distinction in teaching. In 2009, the Academic Senate and the Committee on Academic Personnel began conferring the Distinction in Mentoring Award as well. And that award strives to recognize and celebrate the exceptional mentoring by faculty to faculty and by faculty to clinical and/or postdoctoral fellows. The recipients, and I'll give you a brief overview of who's been nominated and so forth, and then we'll have the persons who nominate them be introduced, and you'll hear more from the nominees themselves. The recipient of the Academic Senate Distinction in Teaching Award for faculty at UCSF 5 years or fewer is Barbie Klein, who is PhD and assistant professor in the Department of Anatomy at the School of Medicine and in the Department of Cell and Tissue Biology at the School of Dentistry. The recipient of the Academic Senate Distinction in Teaching Award for faculty for more than 5 years is Sarah Whetstone, MD, MHS, and associate professor in the Department of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences in the School of Medicine. Interestingly, after repeatedly voting on the nominated applicants for the Distinction in Mentoring Award in this category of associate professors, the review committee remained divided on the single top awardee. So instead, it opted to acknowledge its tie and recognize 2 faculty for their mentoring achievements by awarding 2 associate professors nominees. The first recipient of the Academic Senate Distinction in Mentoring Award for faculty at a rank of associate professor is Andrea V. Jackson, MD, MAS, an associate professor in the Department of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences at the School of Medicine. Oops, let me make sure I don't get names wrong. The recipient of the Academic Senate, the second person for faculty at the rank of associate professor, is Jennifer C. Lai, MD, MBA, an associate professor in the Department of Medicine at the School of Medicine. And finally, the recipient of the Academic Senate Distinction in Mentoring Award for faculty at rank of full professor is Mariana Tulu Shams, PhD, the Kilroy Reality Professor of Psychiatry and Vice Chair of the Community Engagement, Outreach, and Advocacy in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the School of Medicine. With that, we can start the first award category, which is the Distinction in Teaching. And I'd like to introduce Loriana Liard, a member of our Academic Personnel Committee and chair of the Distinction in Teaching Award Review Committee. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Meg. And I must say, I am absolutely thrilled to be here. It was such a pleasure you do lots of things at UCSF, but it was just a privilege to be able to read the nominees and what amazing teachers we have here at UCSF. So I just wanted to start with that by saying that recipients of this award are in a community of really, of like outstanding teachers here at UCSF, which we are really grateful. Let me just tell you that I was fortunate to be the chair of this committee. The Distinction Teaching Awards Review Committee selects the awards. It's chaired by a member of CAP and then comprises 1 full professor from each of the 4 schools and 1 student from each of the 4 schools. So it was great to have student representation. We agreed that all of the nominees were outstanding. And so it's really a great honor. So I have the privilege of being able to introduce the nominators as well as the winners. So first, we are going to start, I would like to introduce Dr. Elizabeth Joyce, PhD, adjunct professor in the Department of Microbiology and Immunology, and Director of Microbiology and Teaching Laboratory in the School of Medicine. She also has a joint appointment in the Department of Cell and Tissue Biology in the School of Dentistry. And Dr. Joyce is the nominator of Dr. Barbie Klein.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start by saying how grateful I am that the UCSF Academic Senate has such a long-standing tradition of recognizing truly outstanding contributions to education. UCSF boasts many exceptional educators. I know, I work with them every day. So receiving this award is truly, indeed, a great honor and recognition. And I couldn't be more pleased that Dr. Barbie Klein has been selected as a 2023 recipient of the Distinction in Teaching Award. I met Dr. Klein in early 2021 when we were asked to co-direct 3 large, complex foundational science courses in the School of Dentistry. This is on top of her already substantial teaching efforts in the schools of medicine, pharmacy, and physical therapy, not to mention her roles as discipline director for 2 blocks in the School of Medicine, and her role as the faculty advisor for the Willed Body program at UCSF. We've worked very closely together over the last 2 years, and this has provided me with a front row seat to witness and learn from a truly gifted and consummate educator. I'm a big fan. Barbie is an accomplished and expert anatomist. She certainly knows her gluteal sulcus from her olecranon. And everything, that's an anatomy joke if you didn't get that. We'll explain later. And everything in between, both deep and superficial, medial and lateral. But it isn't just the remarkable depth and breadth of knowledge that distinguish her as an outstanding educator. That's important. Students rely on her to help them decipher the intricacies and the mysteries of the human body. But to me, what distinguishes her as an outstanding educator is what I think of her as her star power. Her ability to engage and excite students, both in lecture and especially in lab, her capacity to imbue all topics with palpable enthusiasm, and the genuinely curious approach she takes to learning, not just teaching. Barbie is an outstanding educator because she models learning for her students. I've heard her say innumerable times, "Hello, class. I am very excited to share with you what I learned as I prepared for this session." She models inquiry and curiosity. I want to give you one example of this star quality that I observed that made my pilus erectus stand up on my forearm. I'm not an anatomist. So picture yourself at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, coming into class to learn about the anatomy of the face. Now, Barbie doesn't just launch in with the muscles of facial expression and all the nerves. She set the stage by posing a series of questions. What is the face? Is it the most recognizable part of our body? Can you look at a face and instantly know who it belongs to? What about a work of art depicting a face? What about just a portion of a face? And then she proceeds to show us a picture of Billie Eilish, instant recognition by our students, not surprisingly, and Michelangelo's The David, also recognizable as well. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about that morning was she showed a picture of just a set of lips. Of whose? Elvis Presley. And yes, our students who were born 20 years after that man died recognized those lips. So we were all riveted. And how could you not want to learn about the anatomy of a face after an introduction like that? I could go on and on for hours, but I think the best illustration of Barbie's teaching acumen comes from her students, and I'd like to take 2 quotes from 2 of them. "I'll always be grateful for the impact Dr. Klein has had on the trajectory of my career, and many students at UCSF feel the same. Dr. Klein is consistently one of our strongest supporters and advocates. Many of us seek to emulate her in teaching our fellow classmates and are now even considering careers in clinical education. I'm paraphrasing the next one. Dr. Klein is an incredible example of the values UCSF stands for. She has opened a historically exclusive space for students like me. I'll carry the selflessness and expertise Dr. Klein displayed with me throughout my career and do everything I can to pay her kindness forward. Barbie approaches her work with rigor and intentionality. She is clearly dedicated to improving student learning and the student experience. She strives to engage learners to help them make connections for themselves, to inspire them to be the best that they can be, and to give them agency over their own learning. As I said before, UCSF is very fortunate to have many excellent educators, and there is no doubt in my mind that Dr. Klein is among the very best. Please join me in congratulating and celebrating Dr. Barbie Klein on this richly deserved award.
Thank you. That really tugged on my chordae tendineae. I am very honored and humbled to receive this award. My gratitude to the Academic Senate, Dr. Elizabeth Joyce for nominating me, the students and faculty who supported my application, and the selection committee for their time and consideration of my nomination. Thank you also to my partner, David, for supporting my passion for my work and the long hours. And my parents for being here today. Thank you so much for driving up. And to all my friends and family on Zoom. I was asked to answer 3 questions, and I'd like to start with the fast pace of technological advancements in artificial intelligence in medicine. How do you foresee this impacting your learners, and how might you help them prepare for this challenge? Some of you may think that there's not much left to discover in anatomy. True that it's not every day that a new muscle is discovered or a new ligament is described, though check it out, it happens. However, what is evolving at a very rapid pace in anatomy education surrounds technology and how we can use it to supplement and enhance our instruction. We're integrating several different technologies in anatomy education here at UCSF, including ultrasound, virtual reality, and 3D printing. A very popular elective that I co-direct with Dylan Romero, the director of the Makers Lab, is the 3D printing elective, where dental students can learn how to create 3D models from patient DICOM files, like this mandible in the lower left corner. They also get to hear from guest speakers, including dental clinicians who are on the forefront of integrating 3D printing into their clinical practice and their research. We have learned about absolutely amazing interventions used for patients today, such as 3D printed surgical guides, implants, and even an entire temporomandibular joint. So my advice to students to prepare for this challenge is to collaborate. A lot of the work that students and I have been able to accomplish has been through creative problem solving and ingenuity by collaborating with others, especially within the UCSF Makers Lab. Dylan Romero, Scott Drapeau, Jenny Ty, and Era Lipson, thank you all for bringing imagination to life here at UCSF. However, as technology is rapidly evolving all around us, I would like to also acknowledge our donors who altruistically gave their bodies the final thing they could do in this life to educate our future healthcare professionals. I would not have the anatomical knowledge that I hold today, and I could not be as effective as an educator if it was not for the gift of body donation. Because of my experiences learning and teaching anatomy with donors, I know that I'll also donate my body so that I may continue to teach students even after I'm gone. Although they'll miss out on my funny anatomy jokes in that. I think they're funny. I get some laughs. They might be pity laughs. The next question I was asked to answer: in your current teaching role, how do you meaningfully promote UCSF's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in education, as well as patient care research? How are you approaching your own growth to improve in this area? I think that the most impactful contribution that I've had to our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts is the curricular reforms that I made while directing the pelvis, perineum, and human embryology blocks for our second-year medical students. I did not learn this content in the way that I teach it, which was a little scary. I had no idea how it would be received when I completely changed the whole way that anatomy was traditionally described, from the previous heteronormative binary gendered language, which is very pervasive in pelvic and perineum and reproductive anatomy, to focus just on the anatomy and to note the many differences found among us all. I am pleased to say that this change was largely well received, but it's not perfect. And there is still so much work to be done to advance diversity and anatomical representation, and continuing to refine our language that we use to describe anatomy. But I can say that my anatomy colleagues and I are actively collaborating, sharing experiences, listening and learning from each other to move our profession forward as a more inclusive science. And I promise we actually work, we just don't hang out and take pictures all day, but conferences are kind of becoming a family reunion. The last question that I was asked to answer was actually the most difficult for me. What are your strengths that have led you to become a distinguished teacher? And what are you continuing to work on to improve your teaching? Those of you who know me well know that I don't see myself in such a distinguished light. While I am committed to continuous improvement and I approach my instruction with an attitude of curiosity, I really just love being in an anatomy lab and studying with students all day, every day. So to answer this question, it would be helpful to introduce you to my advisors and my mentors and the lessons that they taught me that have shaped the educator that I am today. Some number of years ago, David and I packed up our lives and we moved from sunny Southern California to the coldest place that we ever lived, Illinois. There at Northern Illinois University, I met Dr. Daniel Olson. He was not only my anatomy teacher, but also my master's thesis advisor and my mentor. Dr. Olson helped me navigate how to teach my very first lab classes, how to incorporate active learning, how to engage students, how to teach very complex anatomical concepts in an accessible way. Since he was also my anatomy professor, I was able to see how he taught me and all of my classmates in grad school. He wrote out notes and labeled images electronically with us in real time to manage cognitive load. And I modeled his teaching for students in my labs. In addition to teaching, he also taught me the art of dissection by allowing me additional dissection opportunities outside of our scheduled lab classes. I learned how to meticulously uncover the beauty of anatomy found deep to the skin in all of us. Lessons that he taught me in anatomy lab, I actually teach to students to this day, right across the courtyard here in our anatomy lab. After 2 years and earning my master's degree, I just couldn't get enough grad school. Said no one ever, apparently I did. So David and I ventured down to Indiana University for my doctoral degree, where I met the second love of my life, our fur baby, Piglet Petite. We adopted this little brindle nugget from Indianapolis, and honestly, she's been such a big support for me. Does she make me a better educator? I have no doubt. She is pure joy and a muse for my endless adorable photos. And yes, you will see more of them in this presentation. But she also helps me teach. Here, she has helped me teach the anatomy of the hepatic portal system. You can see her limbs are the superior and inferior mesenteric veins. Her tail and trunk is the splenic vein, neck, hepatic portal vein, and she has this cute little liver head. It's the piglet portal system. But at Indiana University, I also met Dr. Valerie Dean O'Loughlin. For those of you in the field of anatomy, you know that Valerie is a legend. In the Mount Rushmore of anatomy giants, her face is prominently displayed. While it's wonderful to experiment in our classrooms, Valerie introduced me to the scholarship of teaching and learning, where we can actually evaluate how impactful our interventions are for our learners. She's also the definition of a girl boss, past president of the Human Anatomy and Physiology Society, prolific publisher of her research, awarded educator, and the first person throughout the entire Indiana University School of Medicine who earned tenure for education scholarship. She's an exemplary role model, and I'm so grateful for all the lessons that she taught me. And she also has really great taste in IPAs. After earning my PhD, while David and I loved the snow and Piglet really, really loved the snow, it was time to pack up her toy box and move back home to California and here to UCSF. Like Elizabeth had already mentioned, I only met her a few years ago, but she has had a tremendous impact on my development as a professor. She has modeled expert course development and direction in these very large, very complex courses where everything is happening all the time, every day, all at once. I consult with her and collaborate with her on our education research projects. She's an invaluable mentor, but she's also taught me what sponsorship means. I would never have been nominated, considered, selected, and standing before you today if it wasn't for her exceptionally persistent drive to uplift everyone around her, from students to colleagues to mentees, my BMS bestie, the Thelma to my Louise, the best work life. Thank you, E. And I'll end with my greatest teachers, which are the students themselves. I have been fortunate to learn with and from such a diverse range of students, from high schoolers to undergraduates, and now to our wonderful students here at UCSF. They have asked questions that I've never thought to research and have shaped the knowledge that I hold today so that I may better serve future learners. My gratitude to those students who study with me in lab, who energize me to continue this work, some who lovingly drag me up a wall sometimes, though all I enjoy learning with and growing with. So please, to all my students, keep asking questions, stay curious, and of course, study anatomy. Thank you all from the apex of my heart.
A really small recognition for you for all that you've done for UCSF and for our students and for the community. So thank you very much. This is great. So next, moving on, I want to introduce Dr. Tashani Alunga-Sekera, an associate clinical professor in the Department of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences at the School of Medicine. She is the Assistant OBGYN Residency Program Director and the Director of the OBGYN Simulation Center. And Dr. Alunga-Sekera is the nominee of Dr. Sarah Whetstone.
Thank you. Okay, I couldn't get my printer to work, so I'm gonna do some phone reading. So hi, everyone. Again, I'm Tishani Alangasakra, and I have the distinct honor and pleasure of introducing my dear friend and colleague and mentor, Dr. Sarah Whetstone. This year's recipient of the UCSF Distinction in Teaching Award. I have been asked to present the sentiments and praise of numerous faculty, residents, current and present, and students in our department and beyond in our utmost admiration and for this uniquely gifted educator. I've had the opportunity to observe Dr. Whetstone's skills as an educator for almost 15 years. I first met her in 2008 when I was a junior resident, when she was a junior resident and I was a third year medical student. My relationship with Dr. Whetstone thereafter continued as I joined her as a fellow UCSF OBGYN resident, and eventually as a colleague in the Division of General OBGYN here at UCSF. While her roles have evolved considerably over time, the fundamentals of Dr. Whetstone's commitment to education have remained steadfast, embodied primarily by patient advocacy, delivery of evidence-based care, and her commitment to innovation, specifically in the domain of health equity and justice. Dr. Whetstone joined faculty here at UCSF in 2013, and at that time, she was selected to serve as the UCSF Gynecology Site Director for the Medical Student Core Clerkship, a position she held for 5 years. Concurrently, she was the Assistant Residency Program Director for UCSF OBGYN, for the UCSF OBGYN department. As a former resident herself here at UCSF, she noted the difficulty in recruiting and retaining talented, underrepresented in medicine applicants to our program. Dr. Whetstone has led our program and our department to implement a holistic application review process several years ago, which has led to our recruitment of one of the most racially diverse residency programs in the institution, and certainly in the country in OBGYN. One year, her significant efforts led us to matching a class of 100% underrepresented minorities, and we've continued to recruit a large proportion of our underrepresented groups in our residency. Her work to change what the mold of a resident looks like to be a more holistic representation that uplifts racial equity has propelled our department forward in our anti-racism and equity efforts. And we truly believe in her work as an educational leader that has positioned our department to be among the institutional leaders in advancing equity. This work paved the way for her to take on her current role as program director for the UCSF OBGYN residency program. Sorry, I'm reading. I'm nervous to miss anything about one of my favorite people. So Dr. Whetstone has led the way in curriculum development and is truly visionary in the area of health equity. She has led multiple institutional and national panels in creating equitable change within graduate medical education, and her vision has inspired many across the country to adopt similar work to what she has done here at UCSF. She developed a comprehensive OBGYN curriculum, resident curriculum called Empower, educating, mentoring, and preparing OBGYNs to cause for women in under-resourced communities that prepares and inspires OBGYN graduates to provide excellent, justice-informed care to underserved patients within the United States. Since starting this mandatory curriculum, the percent of residents taking positions and work in underserved communities after graduation rose from 26 to 55% in just 2 years. Dr. Whetstone took the lead in developing a national program of didactics for OBGYN residents that reached 6,000 live participants during lectures during the time of COVID and has been viewed over 130,000 times. The lasting impact of this lecture series and the widespread accessibility, particularly to trainees who may not otherwise have had these same resources, has made it still used by students, residents, and fellows to this day and is particularly impactful. In recognition of her efforts, Dr. Whetstone has been awarded numerous awards, including the National Faculty Award for Excellence in Resident Education, the 2020 UCSF Excellence in Innovation and GME Award, and she was induced into the UCSF Academy of Medical Educators. I could go on for an hour about how and why Dr. Whetstone is deserving of this distinction in teaching award by the curriculum she has built, the role she carries in our department and beyond, and the countless awards she has obtained. But I think nothing speaks truer than the words of those she has taught and mentored along the years. They know that Dr. Whetstone is a gifted clinical educator in the classroom, clinic, and operating room, and I can attest to that as one of her many learners. and I'm still learning from her. And this is very evident from her outstanding teaching evaluations and awards from residents and medical students. Her unique skills in leadership, empathy, and engendering self-awareness and self-power in her trainees and learners is what allows her to be a very successful and impactful in her teaching methods. Dr. Andrew Grimes, one of our current residents, said in his letter that one of the biggest challenges in this role as program director is the availability for which you can offer yourself to support learners. Not only is Dr. Whetstone deeply invested in our success and training as resident physicians, she is someone who always makes herself available to offer and provide support for residents. She made herself immediately and unlimitedly available in times of personal challenges, many times reaching out before the needs were even expressed. In these times of challenge, Dr. Whetstone is guiding me to take those experiences and transition to a path of growth and strength as a person. This proactive and genuine care and support that Dr. Whetstone demonstrates is truly reflected of an outstanding leader and educator. In former resident Dr. Diamond Goodwin's letter of support for this nomination, she said of Dr. Whetstone, her presence is essential, it's powerful, and it has sharpened and positively impacted the journeys of so many. Dr. Maura Jones, former chief resident and now MFM fellow at UNC, said that her singular fault being that frequently her vision for us is so much larger than our vision for ourselves. She can see the immense potential we possess and has made it her mission to not only make us see it too, but support us in being our most authentic selves while in pursuit of our dreams. For me, Dr. Whetstone's mentorship, education, and guidance has been one of the most impactful relationships that I've had in my life. Congratulations, Sarah, for this most well-deserved award and recognition of your contribution and dedicated to education and teaching.
Thank you, Tishani, for that really, really special introduction. I have to say, I am definitely an introvert, so speaking in front of people is not always my favorite thing, but very honored to be here. I'd like to start with my gratitude. I think we all know that none of us get to where we are by ourselves, and I always believe in starting my teaching and my talks with expressing gratitude. I want to first thank my parents, Gretchen and Richard, who are my first and my best teachers, and they really always gave me space throughout my life to find the path that I loved, and it's a model that I hope to emulate as a teacher. I want to thank my partner, husband, love of my life, Glenn, and our wonderful children, Langston and Harper, who are the most loving individuals and who give so much support and kindness and compassion, even when I'm not always present because of all the other things that my life demands. And I just hope that they know how much I care about them and how much I do this work in their image. And then I'd like to thank Andrea and Tishani for nominating me for this award. Andrea Jackson, who is also a recipient today and who I'm very honored to call my friend and colleague. We've had a very special journey here. When we were both hired, we were hired as the only 2 Black faculty members in our department. And that sort of identity in that space has really formed a great partnership among us. And for circumstances that really break my heart that she can't be here today, we were excited to celebrate together because I think this work represents sort of our investment, our friendship, and the work that we've done together. So I just want to make sure to emphasize my gratitude for her. And then I have so many wonderful colleagues, Felicia Lester, Meg Autry, Rebecca Jackson, Biftu Mengesha, Katie Brown, who have gone on this journey and who I learned from their example and how to be an excellent clinician and teacher and role model. And to the students and residents who I've had the really great privilege to work alongside with and to learn from, I'm incredibly humbled to see their journey. And as an example of Tishani and many other people, they have far exceeded anything that I've accomplished in my world. So I'm very honored that I get to work with such amazing people. I will say, in the spirit of many things I do, I took some liberties in thinking about the answers to my questions. And I want to sort of talk a little bit about the journey that sort of brought me here, because I think it sort of reflects who I am as an educator. I was in high school and I had to do something over the summer. And one summer I decided to do summer school, and it was my worst summer ever. I was so bored. I couldn't imagine that I voluntarily chose to go to school and sit in class again. And my mom was insistent that I was not allowed to stay at home in future summers. That just wasn't allowed for her. But I had no idea what I would do. And so I went to a bookstore when they existed, and they had those books about like summer internships you could do. And I remember sitting down on the floor and pouring through the pages, trying to find anything that I could do. And for almost all of them, I was ineligible. I wasn't a college student, so I couldn't even apply. And then there was this program I came upon called Summer Bridge, which is a program that allowed high school students and college students to teach elementary and middle school students. And there was actually a site here in San Francisco. I grew up in the Bay Area, and it sort of was perfect. And so I applied and was overjoyed that I was accepted. A, because it meant I didn't have to go to summer school again, but B, because it was this like great opportunity for me. And to be honest, it was transformational for me. I used to be this incredibly shy individual who could barely stand in class and say their name. That's how shy I was. And it was in this small community where I had to teach students of color, about science and the metric system, and come up with courses of my own design, that I actually came out of my shell. And so as much as I saw these young people sort of become so excited in educational spaces, I also found who I was and what I think I was called to do. I went to college still very ambivalent about what I wanted to do. I went to Brown, which I call the choose your own adventure of academic spaces, which was wonderful for me, because that's I don't like to be told what to do, as several in this room may know, but I really oscillated between what I wanted to do, whether it was pursue a career in medicine or pursue a career in education. And my transcript reflected that sort of like ambivalence, with lots of different classes in both domains. And to be honest, the classes associated with medicine didn't seem to reflect my passion. They didn't seem to encompass who I was as an individual. So I opted to join Teach for America and teach. And I ended up in Washington, D.C. I taught 8th grade science, and to this day, it's the hardest job that I've ever had. I don't think I ever estimated how intelligent, intentional 8th graders are at potentially making their teachers' lives more challenging. But it was a wonderful learning experience, because it really taught me great humility, great flexibility. It taught me about how lived experiences came into academic spaces. How, despite our assumptions that education is politically neutral, it absolutely is not. And I will tell you, I was a really bad 8th grade science teacher. And it was humbling. I'd done really well in my life. I was good at standardized testing. I was good at classes. I was good at tests, but I was not good at teaching. And my first year was a real disaster. I could barely get through the curriculum. I was unclear if the students even cared. They were uninspired. They didn't do their homework most of the time. By my second year, I started to figure things out. I realized that the way I taught was really not in line with what they needed. They didn't see themselves in this curriculum of physical science. They didn't really see themselves reflected in science at all. And so I had to think very deeply about how to make them engaged with the work. But I also found that I was obsessed with what I like to call creative consequences for 8th graders. But I was creating a system of teaching that didn't resonate with who I was as a person. I was trying to recreate structures that were rigid, that didn't sort of embrace who they were. And for that reason, I decided that I couldn't continue in that space. It wasn't the space that I was being my authentic self, and I definitely wasn't letting my students be their authentic selves. I went to medical school deciding that teaching wasn't really the career for me, and I rediscovered my passion for medicine, for learning, for engaging communities in different ways. And I tell this story and everyone's like, duh, of course you're gonna be a clinician educator. But at the moment, I didn't know. I didn't know what was set out for me in the future. And to be honest, I found my personal statement for residency a few years ago. Someone in our residency program administration sent it to me like, hey, you might be interested in this. And I opened it and I realized that in a way, I already saw what I would be doing. I just didn't know what it was. And I'll share the last paragraph of my personal statement. I sort of describe who I am as an individual. And I say, to this, I hope to add skilled clinician, generous educator, and dedicated OBGYN. I look forward to growing into the physician I aspire to be. Because of the wonderful role modeling of women educators in my life, I'm excited to teach others about the field I've come to love, to train others in evidence-based medicine and in the practice of OBGYN. I dream of a day when I'm able to give back to the communities that have nurtured me, when I'm able to work with colleagues and mentors in the development of an infrastructure to care for marginalized women in this country. And I feel very lucky because I feel like I get to honor what I set out to do, not knowing that it would fall into the role of residency program director. And I'm really honored that I get to lead our residency program. When I was a resident here, I was one of 2 Black residents. There was no Black faculty in our department. And while I sort of loved the sort of clinical challenges, I often felt very alone as a resident. And when I joined the faculty, I felt very committed to creating something different. And along with many, many others, we've created this residency that looks drastically different than what it ever did when I was a resident. Now nearly 70% of our residents identify as underrepresented in medicine. We see a similar increase in the fellows and in the faculty. It feels like a different place. I can tell you a few days ago, I was on call and I was taking care of a patient who had a very big surgery to remove her uterus due to an abnormally adherent placenta. And she was bleeding through her incision and she was terrified. She had this look of fear, like, am I gonna die at this moment? And the chief resident and I went in to see her, and the chief resident is a Black identifying woman, and I went in to see her, and we noticed it was just superficial bleeding, something they probably hadn't closed with a stitch. And I just held pressure on it, and I said, we're just gonna stay here and we'll figure out the next steps. And she looks at my Black residents, and she looks at me, and she looks back at both of us again and says, there are a lot of Black doctors here. I said, there are. How does that make you feel? And she goes, I love it. And it makes me feel safe. And this is a moment that I couldn't have scripted, but I felt such immense pride in that moment that we could be there for that patient and that patient could feel something different. And it was really special. And the chief resident and I walked out and we celebrated. We stopped the bleeding, of course. And we celebrated that not only were we able to take care of this person clinically, but that she could see herself reflected in us. And I will say that that is sort of what continues to drive the work that I do every day. And I included some quotes here by the people I consider my sheroes. And I think this duality that they encompass of envisioning something different and yet facing the realities in which we practice medicine and which we educate are things that sort of I feel on a daily basis. I have a very clear vision for what I hope that medical education looks like in OBGYN. It's a practice in which the providers reflect the communities that we serve, in which the providers are concentrated in areas of need and not just in metropolitan areas, in which the patients know that their best interests are always centered because we center equity and justice in the work that we do. And yet I can tell you that the daily realities of trying to create that transformational change are tough. And our learners see the hypocrisies, the lies, the hierarchies that are maintained. And so being in that space of envisioning something different and working toward that transformation while seeing learners feel like they're not always supported. Learners not always feeling safe in the clinical spaces in which they work is a space that has been really challenging for me to navigate. Unfortunately, I know their pain all too well. And at the same time, now I'm responsible for their training. And it can be a really difficult place. And yet I'm still inspired that we are in the process of creating something different. And we haven't realized it, and the journey will be extraordinary and is still extraordinary. But I'm hopeful that we'll realize it, and if I don't, that we have positioned many others to carry on that work. And so there are questions about sort of, what do I think about technology and artificial intelligence? And I'll say honestly, that's not my forte at all in education. But I will tell you that part of that reason that I don't have that space to think about those things is because I have more pressing sort of concerns, especially within the OBGYN world, where we have a crisis in maternal mortality in this country, when we have horribly inequitable rates of uterine cancer and cervical cancer outcomes by race. When my learners tell me about the challenges they have in working in certain environments with nurses, staff, faculty. And so my hope is that one day I'll have the space to really be able to think about how we leverage those technologies to create enhanced educational experiences for our learners. I think about it a lot in my national work when we think about how do we transform education. We're lucky here in the Bay Area. We're sort of untouched in terms of access to abortion and contraception. I don't have to think about it at all. I know my trainees will graduate and be fully competent in the full range of abortion and contraceptive services. But for over 50% of the country, that's not true. You have people graduating from residency who don't get that option to see how to provide that life-saving care, that care that allows people to realize the real sort of priorities of reproductive justice. And so that's actually where I have encouraged people to think broadly about how do we use technology to create realistic simulations when political battles prevent individuals who need access to abortion from accessing it, while still ensuring that we can train a generation of physicians to be able to provide care that at times can be life-changing and is always life-altering. So those are the things I think about. And I think as an educator, I've really been blessed with some tremendous teachers who I have learned so much from. They've taught me how to write specific objectives, how to think carefully about how to write evaluations that always give space for growth and for change, and that help me reorient the priorities so that we are aligned with the needs of the communities that we serve. And still, I have a lot of growth as an educator in how to create spaces for vulnerability for myself and for my trainees, so we can reflect on the areas that we see need to change, while still allowing ourselves to thrive and blossom in the environments that we are. And so it is with great gratitude that I accept this award and thank the people here for their support.
So it's my pleasure to give you this small token of our recognition. Thank you for being such an inspiration to our patients, our trainees, and to other faculty members. Thank you. Congratulations. Now, I now introduce Dr. Hannah Glass, who is Vice Chair of the Committee on Academic Personnel and the Chair of the Distinction in Mentoring Award Review Committee.
Great, thanks, Lori. So the Distinction in Mentoring Award Review Committee selects the winners of the Distinction in Mentoring Awards. And this committee is chaired by a member of CAP, that was me, and comprises one full professor and one associate professor from each of the 4 schools. The nominees this year were outstanding. In fact, they were so good that for the first time ever, we opted to select 2 award winners from the associate professor level for their mentoring achievements. And so today I'm pleased to introduce this year's winners and their nominators. Our first nominee is in the associate professor category is Dr. Andrea Jackson. Unfortunately, Dr. Jackson is unable to attend today's ceremony, but she's an associate professor in the Department of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences. She's chief of OBGYN and Gynecologic Subspecialty Division at UCSF and co-director of the UCSF Black Women's Health and Livelihood Initiative and Embrace, a perinatal program recognized in 2022 by Vice President Kamala Harris as a model for providing racially conscious perinatal postpartum physical and mental health care to Black families. Dr. Jackson's nominators say her intelligence, both emotional and intellectual, warmth, creativity, and dedication have been a source of inspiration for me and many others at UCSF. Dr. Jackson is a testament to the pride values of UCSF, and her commitment to our patient population is unparalleled. She not only mentors, but practices what she teaches her mentees. She is, quote, in the trenches, and I can count on her to be an advocate at all levels. And finally, Dr. Jackson should write the guidebook for what it means to be a mentor. I cannot imagine anyone more deserving of recognition. Her nominator is Dr. Amanda Yeaton Massey, and she is with us on Zoom today to say a few words about Dr. Jackson's outstanding contributions as a mentor. Dr. Yeaton Massey is an assistant professor in the Department of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences, and is the medical director of the Perinatal Mental Health and co-director of the UCSF Perinatal Wellness Program. Welcome, Dr. Yeaton Massey.
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I'm just so sorry that Dr. Jackson can't be with us to hear all of this today, because I think, one thing that all of us who have nominated her would agree on is that she is perhaps one of the most humble and unassuming human beings and has accomplished just so much. I hope that she watches this recording and hears all of the wonderful things about her. So as it was already mentioned, Dr. Jackson is an associate professor in the Department of Women's Health, and she is the division chief of general OBGYN, and then also the associate director of the Black Wellness Clinic, and then also founded and directs the Black Women's Health and Livelihood Initiative, and founded and directs the Embrace program, which provides race concordant care for Black birthing families. And I think, one of the best things always to get across what somebody has meant as a mentor to me is just to tell a story. And I think my favorite story about Dr. Jackson actually goes back to well before I was at UCSF. I had been interviewing for residency programs, and I was on the East Coast. It was December, it was cold. I had come from California. The whole process was terrible and lonely. And I remember going on a tour at Mass General, and it had just been a slog of a day. And I don't remember very much except that I was tired and my feet hurt. And this woman, who turned out to be the amazing Andrea Jackson, gave us our tour at Mass General. And she introduced herself as the chief resident and shared that she had matched in a family planning fellowship at UCSF and would be leaving to come back to California. And she gave us this tour, and I remember very little about the tour, but I remember being so struck by her presence and thinking, this is the kind of person who should be in medicine. She had this incredible warmth and energy to her. And I remembered her 7 years later when I came back and joined UCSF as junior faculty. And I'm a maternal fetal medicine specialist, and he really had very little occasion to interact with Dr. Jackson, and certainly after the pandemic had even less opportunity. But I decided I wanted to seek her out to be a personal and professional mentor because I had been so struck by her, and it was one of the best choices I've ever made. And I approached her and just said, listen, I remember you from 7 years ago. I'm sure you don't remember me. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to be a mentor. And she took me on as a mentee with open arms and has been an incredible source of support to me over my 4 years at UCSF. I know some quotes were already shared, but I would like to share a couple of other quotes from some of my co-nominators for Dr. Jackson. So one of the nominators, Dr. Katie Brown, said, when I think about my current job and role, I am lucky to be able to say I love my job and I love what I do. I really owe that all to her. When I think about what holds me here at UCSF, it's my fabulous job and colleagues, and most of all, it's her. And I think many of us share that sentiment. Another mentor or mentee, Dr. Hawkins, shared creation of professional systems to provide the support of mentoring support to all junior faculty ensures equitable distribution of support. Dr. Jackson's leadership as an individual mentor and institutional change agent warrant recognition. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And then another one of her mentees is actually Nagma Faruqi, who's been practicing for over 30 years, but still considers Dr. Jackson to be one of her most wise and wonderful mentors. And I could go on and read you just pages of wonderful things about her, but suffice it to say, she is an incredibly accomplished human being who, instead of using her success to elevate herself, she has just shared it generously with junior faculty, residents, fellows, patients, staff, you name it. If they are in her orbit, they have benefited from Dr. Jackson. So it is just with profound gratitude to the committee for selecting her and recognizing all of her wonderful contributions. Thank you.
In the assistant professor category is Dr. Jennifer Lai. Dr. Lai is an associate professor of medicine and the director of the UCSF Advancing Research in Clinical Hepatology and the director of patient-facing research care of the NIH-funded Liver Center. Dr. Jessica Rubin, assistant professor of medicine, is the nominator for Dr. Lai.
Sorry. Okay. Can we see it or not? All right. Now I turn the screen on. Looks like he's working on something. Well, I can start talking. Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Rubin. You heard I'm an assistant professor of medicine in the division of GI, and I am fortunate to have been mentored by Dr. Jennifer Lai for the last 6 years. I'm actually filling in today for Sharad Wadwani, who was the official nominator for Jen for this award, but clearly it is a testament to her mentorship skills that there are so many of us waiting in the wings to introduce her today. Still doesn't look like, do I need to push something here? Do I need to do share, maybe?
It's sharing also. It's
Oh.
the projector is, I've opened the projector.
Oh, there we go.
There.
Okay. All right. So I want to spend just a minute going over Jen's career highlights for those of you who do not have the pleasure of knowing her as well as I do. So she got her undergraduate degree at Stanford, followed by a joint MD, MBA at Tufts.
and an internal medicine residency at Columbia. While she claims that her brief stint for training on the East Coast is what contributed to her grit and her clinical prowess, I'm not sure I agree. She ultimately came back to the West Coast for GI and transplant hepatology fellowships at UCSF and has not left since. She very quickly, early in her career, became a clinical research powerhouse for her pioneering work on frailty in patients with end-stage liver disease, which earned her a career development award from the American College of Gastroenterology, from which she quickly transitioned to an NIA K-23. And she has been continuously funded since then by both the NIH, as well as nearly every GI hepatology, transplant, and aging foundation. She currently has an R01 from the NIA with several others, which will likely soon be funded, and recently received a K-24 to support exactly this, her passion of mentoring. She has received countless awards for her research, including being a 40 under 40 business leader by the SF Times, among several others. As you heard already, she leads ARCH, which is the research arm of our GI and hepatology division, and serves as director of the patient-facing research core of the UCSF Liver Center. She has several national and international leadership positions, which I don't have time to go through in detail, but you can see a couple of them here. And then recently, during her sabbatical, she sought to broaden her clinical and research expertise by becoming a board-certified physician nutrition specialist. This is just an overview, but clearly Jen has received national recognition as a pioneer at the intersection of geriatrics and hepatology. And somehow, despite this impressive resume, she has also found the time to mentor 26 early stage investigators, each with at least one first author publication, for a total of over 70 publications. Currently, she has 6 junior faculty mentees, and that's just at UCSF. They actually has them around the country, who have all received foundation, institutional, or NIH career development awards within their first 2 years on faculty. So I really want to highlight 3 qualities that make Jen such an amazing mentor to so many of us. First is certain, this is a word cloud I created with all the letters of recommendation from all of her nominators. So first is certainly what she can teach us from her own formula for success over the last several years about how to be an outstanding researcher. As one of her other mentees said, she is unrelentingly a doer and encourages her mentees to be this way as well. This is about more than just motivation, passion, and scientific rigor, but is also as much about organization and time management. Jen truly studies efficiency, as she says, and will always welcome the opportunity to discuss the Eisenhower matrix. And you can feel free to ask her about this after the talk if you don't know what it is. Second, Jen is an innovative clinical researcher and supports each of her mentees to develop their own unique research visions and to help us strategize not just on our individual research projects, but to ensure our success in our own careers as we transition to independent investigators. Through sponsorship, networking, collaboration, she reinforces her commitment to each of her mentees. And finally, she gives just enough tough love. As a self-proclaimed tiger mom to both her own kids and her mentees, these are her words, not mine, she is supportive and invested while also providing unabashedly direct and honest feedback, pushing us to be the best that we can be. She achieves the perfect balance of being both hands-on and hands-off, and is almost always available, except for the 3 hours every day she is perfecting her tennis game. It may not be quite that much, and actually even then, she still is available between sets. In all honesty, as Sharad actually wrote in his nomination letter, Jen is the type of mentor that we should all strive to be. She advocates for her mentees and takes no credit for their successes. Jen is truly one of a kind, so congrats, Jen, and thank you so much to everyone for giving her this award. Thanks.
Very impressive word cloud, Jess. Okay, well, thank you so much. I was delighted to see Tiger Mom stayed in. I was privy to the conversation among my mentees about whether Tiger Mom was going to stay in or not. So thank you. That should be kind of the next 15 minutes of this talk, but a huge thank you to Jess for the kind introduction. A huge thank you to the mentees who did contribute, and all the letter writers actually who contributed to writing the supporting the nomination, because I know those are full of a lot of letters. There was a lot of time put into it. So that included Sharad Wadwani, Jessica Rubin, Jin Ji, Joe Kularo, Bob Wachter, and Jonathan Turdeman, my chief and chair, as well as Jackie Maher and Sandy Fang, two of my mentors actually who contributed to the nomination. So thank you very much. And then a very big thank you to my family who's on Zoom. Hi, Cindy, my sister who's a hospitalist here. Hi, my husband and my parents also who are Zooming in. So I was asked to answer these 3 questions or frame my talk around these 3 questions. And so one of them is, what are your strengths that have led you to become a distinguished mentor? And what are you continuing to work on to improve your mentoring relationships? The second is to please describe your approach to mentee engagement and mentoring across differences. And then the last is, what do you see as the greatest challenge your mentees will face in the next 5 years? And I think that instead of answering these individual questions, I thought that all of these questions could actually be answered by my general structured and formal approach to mentoring and to my mentoring program in general, which can best be described as an academic incubator and accelerator. Now, I know that all of us in this room and on Zoom are familiar with these terms, incubator and accelerator, in terms of business, because of where we sit in the region of Silicon Valley and the center of technological innovation. But just a reminder, and kind of one of the definitions that I've really most absorbed, is that a business incubator and accelerator are comprehensive programs that offer startups and new ventures access to the resources that they need all under one roof. And these resources can best be characterized by coaching, capital, and connections. Now, a lot of people use the terms incubator and accelerator interchangeably, and I'll do the same. But just to differentiate a little bit, an incubator technically serves startups in the product development phase, so kind of before they have a minimum viable product. An accelerator speeds up the growth of a startup that has already built a minimum viable product. And so the fact that my mentoring program, my mentoring approach kind of spans all the way from medical student training before these students and these learners have a minimum viable product or an idea, really, to early stage faculty when they really do have their own idea and I just need to sort of speed up their progress. So that's kind of why I feel like my program doesn't fit into either an incubator or an accelerator, but covers both. But before I could really formalize my mentoring program and sort of my firm as an incubator and accelerator, I really needed to figure out, well, what am I about? What am I building this incubator and accelerator around? And so I really had to come up with a mission. This mission statement has kind of evolved over a period of time, but at this current moment, it is to empower the next generation of clinical researchers with the skills and tools to advance the science of improving the lives of patients living with liver disease. Interestingly, when I first started mentoring, and I kind of just sort of accidentally ended up in it because learners would come into my office asking to be mentored on research projects, I can't say that I was particularly intentional about this particular mission. I felt like, oh, well, I'm at UCSF, I'm on faculty, anyone who wants mentorship, I will give mentorship. And interestingly, as my program has expanded, as I've taken on more and more people within my portfolio, my mission statement has actually gotten more focused. And what I really want to highlight in this mission statement is that I am a mentor to clinical researchers. Nowadays, I feel like the clinician educators are so well trained in curriculum development and in learner theories, in how to support learners in kind of teaching, that I actually not trained as that. And so I actually have felt less and less that I'm able to mentor people who want to be clinician educators. Similarly, people who want to go into leadership, administration, they want to go into clinical program development. Again, I'm not trained in that. I'm trained as a clinical researcher. And so I have actually, as I've gotten more mature in my mentoring, I've gotten more niche in really understanding what's my skill set And if I'm going to have, everyone has just a limited number of hours in the day, and just did, I will confess, some of it does go to tennis. But, I have limited resources, I have limited time, that I really wanted to, what am I building and how am I going to help best support the people that I mentor? It's going to be built around supporting clinical investigators. The one place, and then the other thing I will say is that although ultimately the end goal is to improve the lives of patients, it's through the mechanism of, there's so many ways to improve the lives of patients, right? You can be a clinician, you can see patients every day, you can be a teacher and sort of educate the next generation. But for me, I am really dedicated to improving the lives of patients through research. I love just the pursuit of asking questions and developing hypotheses, designing studies, and putting out data that changes the way that we deliver patient care. The one place I will say that I've expanded is, although I'm a hepatologist and my initial mentoring portfolio really revolved around patients living with liver diseases, the one place I have felt comfortable expanding is into other individuals and other patients living with chronic diseases. Doesn't have to be liver, but have included mainly those with advanced chronic diseases. So you can't just have, a title. I'm just going to call myself an incubator or an accelerator. You can't just have a mission, because you have to start somewhere. And of course, it starts with the people. So this is just a sampling of my startup portfolio. And I just brought along people. I'm showing you people. It's not doing the whole portfolio justice, but it really covers the whole span of from medical students to early faculty. And so I've taken on people at the medical student stage, and they've continued on with me. I've taken people at the residency stage, they've continued on with me. Fellowship stage continued on with me. And as I've matured in my own personal research program, I've now been able to take on people who are already early faculty looking to develop their clinical research portfolios. And they have also continued on with me. So I've been so grateful to having been at UCSF, to really be able to recruit and interview and take on and be a part of these incredibly talented, hardworking, and really curious and open-minded individuals. So you can't just have seed, you can't just have great people, but the purpose of my incubator and accelerator is to actually provide them with some foundational skills, and then you have to give them some nutrients. And so the foundational skills comes in the form of a curriculum that and now we, because a lot of my mentees are getting much more mature and really contributing to the curriculum, really consists of two types of foundational skills. One are the hard skills, and the second are the soft skills. And the hard skills are things that I consider are sort of the technical things that you have to learn to be a clinical researcher. I do require everyone in my startup portfolio to learn statistical programming. They have to learn, they can choose what they use, they can choose Stata, they can choose R, they can do SAS, but they just have to learn how to code a little bit. So that, ultimately, I don't expect them to continue coding. I haven't touched one of these programs in years, and they will be working with an analyst, but I do want to give them the tools to be able to communicate with their analyst, because a clinical researcher's skill, our pipette, is data manipulation. It is coding, actually. I do require all of my mentees to learn one big database. It might be UNOS, it might be these publicly available transplant databases, nationwide inpatient sample, increasingly it's going to be the VA or other types of databases, because that allows them to generate kind of sort of what I call low-hanging fruit papers really fast, while they're developing their main minimum viable product, while that is kind of under works. We also learn in our curriculum how to choose a project. What are the kinds of questions that actually make for good projects? I have a manuscript template, right? Every manuscript looks different, but in secret, they're kind of all the same. A 3-paragraph introduction. I do a 5-paragraph introduction just to start. Once they get familiar with it, they can deviate. But you'll see the first manuscript of all of my startup mentees. They all look exactly the same. Second paragraph always starts with this question. So it's just kind of the formula that we use. And we talk about the hourglass structure of a specifics aims page. We talk about how to give a talk and tell the story arc of a talk. And I think Jessica Rubin did a very good job giving a great talk, as well as how to make slides presentable and sort of interesting and capture the audience's eye. In terms of the soft skill, I promised Jessica I did not actually coordinate our talks, but she was very well trained. Time management is absolutely key. We talk about time management actually every quarter, and we're constantly updating our time management skills and how to be more efficient. I do encourage all of my startups to take on an online task manager to help manage their tasks and organize their time. How to say yes or say no. I'm obsessed with the Eisenhower matrix, as Jess already told you, so it did show up in here. I personally continue to use it, and every time my mentees come to me and ask, well, should I take this on? Should I take that on? I just pause and I wait for them to say, okay, I put it through the Eisenhower matrix and this is what I decided. We do have a formal curriculum around negotiations, networking. We have formal curriculum about mentoring, when to mentor, when to start mentoring, who to start mentoring with, and how to mentor. We also have a curriculum around developing mission statements. It can always evolve, but it's really good to understand what your core beliefs are and sort of what your core mission is as you answer questions and design studies. How to manage research budgets, of course, as well as nowadays, you know, it's getting with inflation and NIH budgets being as small as they are, you know, how to find other ways to fund our research. And then we have to provide our mentees with water and nutrients. And so some of the resources that I have been building within the curriculum or within my firm, within my accelerator and incubator, are things like patient data. So I give the startups within my portfolio access to the patient data that I've collected from my prospective cohort, over 3,000 patients with advanced liver disease, as well as the research infrastructure with the 6 study coordinators. We can kind of shift around some studies or shift around some effort of my coordinators to help accommodate my mentees' additional projects, and also tapping into the UCSF Department of Medicine Data Core, which helps extract data from EPIC, so we can leverage the big data there. A biospecimen bank, I'm so grateful to the Department of Medicine Cohort Award that I got in 2014 to help start to seed fund a biobank, which now has 1,200 patient specimens, urine, blood, DNA, liver, fat, muscle, so that my startup portfolios can come in and they can propose studies with 500 samples, and they can sort of get a study and write a grant on it right away. A statistical expertise, I'm lucky to have just super PhDs within the Department of Epi I've been collaborating with for years now, as well as incredible data analysts. And then the network, just my own connections, both within UCSF as well as nationally, to help make the right introductions, to help my mentees find the right advisors and mentees that they need to take their research to the next level. All of this takes resources from me. It's a lot of money. It's been built from NIH grants and NIH funding through the years. It's come from industry. These are some of the creative sources, investigator-initiated awards, as well as some of the residuals from clinical trials. Foundation awards have helped a lot, and increasingly, we are all researchers are depending a lot more on philanthropy, which I'm constantly always trying to find opportunities for. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the fact that my own incubator and accelerator would not be possible if I weren't sitting in a much larger incubator and accelerator, which is UCSF. And I want to acknowledge a lot of the programs that I leverage within my own program so that my mentees can leverage as well. And those are the Department of Medicine Cohort Award, which we're always applying for. And my own biobank got started through that. The RAP Award is just an incredible resource for the startups at UCSF. The UCSF Liver Center, which is funded by P30, also it not only is funded by the NIH, but really continually requires additional support and collaboration with the Department of Medicine and other UCSF institutions to help support it as well. The Department of Medicine itself, GI division, really helps support some of my research. The hepatology T32, also NIH funded. The CTSI, Department of Medicine Prepare program, which has been so critical for my mentees to have other individuals review their grants, just to have external grant reviewers. And in fact, the Department of Medicine pays the reviewers an amount for their time. And so that's just been an incredible resource and has made, has absolutely contributed to My Startups getting funded, and the K Scholars Program, and then the Department of Medicine Data Core, all of these resources as it's just my plug, honestly, as the finances get tighter and tighter from decreased clinical revenues. I really hope that the Department of Medicine and UCSF as an educational body continues to support and pitch in on these resources, because if we take the money away and rely entirely just on extramural support, we're going to lose our pipeline of the next generation of clinical investigators. So of course, as with any firm, it's very important to understand what the return on investment is, and any firm in Silicon Valley is looking for, any incubator, accelerator is looking for their unicorn. Lucky for me, unicorns at UCSF are very easy to find. I feel like everybody is a unicorn here because everyone has been so successful through just their grit and their hard work and their embrace of new ideas and collaboration. But given my very narrow focus on empowering clinical investigators, I would say that my unicorn is defined as a funded clinical investigator who is as passionate about clinical research as I am. So I really do, I really do aim to empower funded clinical investigators. That is my mission, and this is my ultimate return on investment. These are my unicorns. But there are other ways to measure return on investment, and that is through productivity and scientific contributions. And I am very proud, and Jessica mentioned that my portfolio of mentees have put out 70% of first author papers thus far, representing about 40% of my published volume. And I'm very excited for the future when it's 50%, 60% of my published volume, and that I will no longer say first author, but I will say senior author, and I'm somewhere in the middle, or maybe not even on there at all. I have over 10 CEOs successfully trained, and my CEOs I consider as individuals who trained with me at some postdoc level, so as a resident, as a fellow, and then secured academic research protected faculty positions. So we've got 10 CEOs trained and 10 startup companies that have been launched. 100% have been, extramurally funded within the first 2 years of getting on faculty. This to me are my own personal metrics of success, and I've been so proud of my startups and the CEOs behind them for having gotten there. So in the last slide, I just want to talk about the potential threat that I was asked to address. So I think that when ChatGPT first came out and I started learning about large language models and sort of the power of AI and how user-friendly it can be, I really do see this as a potential threat. Clinical researchers are desktop researchers. We mainly sit down and we type, and we sort of play around with data. And if you have a data set, classically and traditionally, clinical researchers, we would design a study, we would talk it over with the statistician to apply a statistical model or statistical technique, and that was all stuff that we had to do in our head, and we design it and write it and present it. And now you can just put a raw data set into one of these large language models and ask it for an association. And then you can ask it to put it into a paper, and you can ask it to put it into tables. And it is a potential threat to the clinical investigator. And so, I thought that, and I thought, oh my gosh, that is kind of scary that we've all been trained to do this. I've spent 10 years trying to train to do this, and now ChatGPT will do it instantly. But then you start to use it, and you realize actually ChatGPT puts out really bogus associations. They're not adjusting for necessarily the things you would want to consider. The papers kind of suck. The writing is really general, and so actually it takes a lot of skill to be able to recognize that. And so although sure, if the metric is only I just want a paper out in publication, fine. Then ChatGPT, large language models are a threat. But actually, I think there's a real opportunity. I think that actually this is a place that if we stay on top of it and we're really aware of the limitations of these large language models, then my job as the head of this incubator and accelerator is to figure out how to train, to develop within my own curriculum, a way to integrate and just sort of lean in to these AI, these large language models, lean into this and leverage these technologies where it can improve our efficiency and save time to then take our stuff to the next level. So one of the examples that, and I'm doing this actually with my mentees who have been much more facile with this technology than I have. For example, you know, all my mentees code, and they are now, rather than Googling or learning how to write each individual line of code, they will actually ask ChatGPT, you know, give me some sample code for, you know, this model or this statistical method, and that's their starting point. And then from there, they adapt it. They put in their confounding variables. They apply it to their own science. It just saves them hours and hours of work. And so how do we develop our clinical research curriculum and clinical research training that really embraces this and sees the strengths out of it? I think that the clinical researchers and my startups that are really going to turn into unicorns are the ones who are going to know how to leverage these technologies and make their work better. So I'm very excited for the future of that. So thank you very much.
All right, well, such inspiring speakers. We're up for our final mentoring award today, going to Dr. Marina Toulouse-Shams. Dr. Toulouse-Shams is a Kilroy Realty Professor of Psychiatry and Vice Chair of Community Engagement, Outreach, and Advocacy in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. She's also the Deputy Vice Chair for Research at the DPBS at Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital. Her nominator this afternoon is Dr. Andreas Saratin, Professor in the Department of Psychiatry and the UCSF Weill Institute for Neuroscience and the department's faculty mentoring lead. Welcome, Dr. Saratin.
Thank you very much, Dr. Glass. First of all, congratulations to all the award winners. You're very inspiring and your work is very impactful. So thank you so much. It's an honor to be here to introduce my colleague, Dr. Marina Toulouse-Shams. On behalf of the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences Faculty Mentoring Council and my co-nominators, Dr. Matt State, our chair, Lisa Fortuna, Executive Vice Chair, Michelle Porsche, Vice Chair for Diversity and Health Equity, and mentees, Joanna Falk, Megan Romaya, and Maggie Del Cid. It is my honor to introduce the winner of the Distinction in Mentoring Award for the full professor category, Dr. Marina Toulouse-Shams. And I'm going to start with a quote from a letter from Dr. Joanna Falk. It is rare to encounter a mentor such as Dr. Toulouse-Shams, who has the research and clinical expertise, passion and dedication and skills to support mentees from diverse backgrounds. Dr. Toulouse-Shams supports her mentees as both scholars and people, treating us as valued collaborators, and recognizes the distinct challenges mentees from marginalized groups face when navigating careers in academic medicine. Drawing on her own experiences as the daughter of immigrants and a woman in academia, she fosters a sense of understanding and belonging for mentees experiencing discrimination and hardship, skillfully balancing validation and skill building for navigating a complex working environment. Dr. Toulouse-Shams was nominated for this award because we feel she's the quintessential mentor, as shown not only through the high number of her mentees, but also through the quality, creativity, and impact of her mentorship activities. Over 60% of her mentees come from underrepresented in medicine or historically marginalized backgrounds. And to date, she has mentored close to 50 trainees, including PhD graduate students, psychiatry residents and fellows, psychology predoctoral interns, postdoctoral fellows from multiple disciplines, as well as junior faculty. She has received numerous awards for her work, including being selected through competitive processes for AAMC Early Career Women Faculty Development Seminar, the UCSF Center for AIDS Research Mentoring the Mentors Workshop, and the Leadership Institute for Women in Psychology. She was also selected as 2020 commencement speaker by all the graduating learners in our departments, and that includes multiple programs. And most recently, Dr. Tulu Shams won our department's Underrepresented Minority Research Mentoring Award in 2021. As mentioned before, Dr. Tulu Shams is a highly sought after mentor. Her mentees have developed successful research programs at UCSF and elsewhere, and they've described those in the letters. But her mentoring work goes well beyond the individual level. To highlight one important project, in 2019, Dr. Tulu Shams was awarded a National Institute on Drug Abuse, NIDA, K24 Mid-Career Award, which protects her time to provide research mentorship in the areas of substance use and juvenile justice to early career scholars. And last year, she received a competitive K24 supplement with focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility mentorship. She uses this supplement to focus on using technology to advance behavioral health equity for justice-involved youth through the mentorship, support, and networking of early career scholars from underrepresented in medicine groups. This project is very innovative, and I hope you'll hear from her a little bit about that, blending her passion for mentoring, advocacy for justice-involved youth, and technology. So I'll stop here, but want to summarize that your mentoring work, Marina, has been innovative and transformative, and we are looking forward to seeing where your journey takes you from here. Thank you so much, and please join me in congratulating Dr. Tulu Shams.
Okay, this is at the point when you teach, when you're in your teaching, you say, everybody get up and stretch, but I won't do that. All the people on Zoom can do that as we come to a close. I am incredibly humbled and honored to stand before everybody and everybody on Zoom today to accept this award. And I am going to be thanking people throughout, and I'm going to miss someone inevitably. And just know that you are a part of this as well, because I wouldn't be standing up here if it weren't for this group of people who are on the screen, who represent our folks from our Juvenile Justice Behavioral Health Lab at UCSF at San Francisco General, Dr. Saraton, Dr. State, Dr. Fortuna Porsche, mentees, Dr. Polk Ramaya, and Del Cid, and many, many others. So thank you. So I'm going to start by talking about who I am and how did I get here. And this is a positionality statement. And here I'm going to give a huge shout out to one of my mentees who has become a dear colleague, is Vice Chair for Justice, Equity, Diversion, and Inclusion at UCLA Semel, Dr. Erica Bath, who has been co-leading a national mentoring program that I'll talk about in a minute. But recently, she has been encouraging all of us to include positionality statements in every single one of our talks so that you can understand where we are coming from and who we are. So I've included 8 points here. This is fluid, right? It might change your positionality statement, but I'm encouraging all of my mentees to engage in it because it's also a risk, right? What we put out there about ourselves. So I hold the vice chair and endowed professor title in my department. I'm not American nor a US citizen. I'm a US resident. I'm a white passing, cisgender, heterosexual, Iranian immigrant born in the United Kingdom. I am an only child of a former economics professor and healthcare administrative assistant. I'm a mother to a tween and a teen daughter, 12 and 15 years old. I hold class and wealth privilege. I'm the product of a public school education throughout. And I was inspired to devote my career to youth behavioral health and decarceration after a life-changing high school project assignment. I had the good fortune of seeing everyone's talks before, and Dr. Whetstone, we have many intersections, even in the Bay Area, as I talk about my high school experiences as well. So just a little sampling of influences on my positionality and how I got here. The top line being my Iranian father, who is on Zoom. Hi, Baba. And my mother and me, junior high, high school pictures. But really what you should know is we came in 1979 during the revolution. I was 6 years old, and my father taught me values around humility and resilience. Hard not to get emotional a little bit. As I stand here, and he taught me family, caring, as well as my mother, and what it meant to take risks, to come over, and we moved to Berkeley, California, and then I grew up in El Cerrito in the East Bay. The next picture over is my cousin in Iran, one of my cousins. I have a huge family there. All my family is there except for my father. It was the first time I went back in 2001, right before 9/11. And the book that you see next to it is an incredible book published in 2017 by Neda Maghbouleh, who is an Iranian sociologist in Canada, who wrote an incredible book that talks about the complex and contradictory association of race in the US for Iranians. It was the first time I read something, felt very seen and very heard. The middle row are all different depictions of my locations and my environments. Ranging from the Bay Area to the Women Like Freedom picture with the flag in Iran, to Welsh flag, to a sofre, which is typically for Persian New Year and represents different aspects of rebirth and renewal for the new year. And on the bottom, this will make more sense as I move along, but really reflects different aspects of my upbringing in living nearby San Quentin that actually influenced my career trajectory, and El Cerrito High School, public high school that I went to, as well as growing up in the Bay Area when the HIV/AIDS epidemic hit, in relation to what I saw in terms of community activism and also building a career in adolescent HIV prevention research. So here are my present day inspirations as well, in addition to everyone you saw on the first slide. And this is Layla and Daria, the loves of my life, my 12 and 15-year-olds who inspire me to be better than I have ever known myself to be every single day. I mean, it's not all, rainbows and unicorns, but it is a form of mentorship. Parenting is a form of mentorship that is so experiential for those who are parents. And raising two adolescent girls in the era of COVID, our multiple syndemics going on, is a greater challenge than I ever expected to confront, and makes me be a bigger and better person every day. And my partner, Brian Borsari, who's also a professor here in the department and a psychologist over at the VA, which is why he's physically not over here right now and on Zoom. And then just the intergenerational joy, my extended family in Rhode Island. So I also was at Brown on the faculty, did my training there for 12 years, and my extended family on the other side is from New England and incredibly supportive. And just the sheer joy and happiness that family can bring, as you see my daughters with my father. So this all relates, and actually I didn't know that Andrea was going to talk about going beyond the individual level, but this is really how I approach my mentoring, much like how I approach our research work. For the past 20 years, I've been focused on, with my mentees and staff, in identifying ways to intervene on trajectories of substance use, mental health, reentry into the carceral system, and sexual and reproductive health needs, and to understand how to intervene across multiple influences of behavior. So this is eco-developmental theory, and it is an expansion of Bronfenbrenner's 1979 social ecological model, where there is no such thing as an individual lives in a vacuum, right? We all, in short, in very brief, we all live with multiple concentric circles around us at the meso, the exo, and the macro level. And for our work, we're really trying to understand at what points and what directions and what influences do we intervene so that we prevent young people from entering into
the carceral system, for example? Or what point do we intervene so families have more strengths to be able to cope with when an adolescent who is involved in the legal system and also has significant psychiatric symptoms, how do we intervene? So from a mentoring perspective, I bring the same approach into our mentoring team. None of my mentees are in a vacuum. When we engage in mentoring discussions, I want to understand immediately the mentor-mentee relationship brings us into this meso level, much like a family. Focus on communication between mentor and mentee, interpersonal trust, congruency of expectations, many of the things that we think about as family in family interactions. And on the exo level, thinking about organization, department, how much does your department support mentor-mentee relationships? What are the resources? How are you as a mentee able to get those resources? How am I able as a mentor to sponsor you to get those resources or to sponsor you to engage in other opportunities in the department? And then on the macro level, what's brought into our work as mentor-mentees, what culture do you bring into the room? And culture can be defined very broadly. What positionality do you bring into the space? How am I transparent about where I sit in this relationship? What are the societal and political pressures that are happening that are impacting not just our relationship, but our work, our future, what you want to do? It could be ranging from that grant that you want to submit to NIH and what are the political and societal influences, all the way down to an interaction that you had in the department that you can't sit still because it was so distressing and oppressive. So who are the milestone mentors who have gotten me to that place? And there are so many mentors that I can't fully acknowledge. These are mentors who provided an opportunity or said yes and let me spread my wings, which is also another approach I really take with my mentees. So Bruce Green was my junior year high school teacher at El Cerrito High, phenomenal teacher who gave us this project in 88, 89, called the iSearch. And we had to ask a question about something that we were incredibly passionate about answering. And then we had to basically engage in the research process to answer that question. My question, while my peers were asking things like, what's it like to own your own business? Or what's it like to be a protester? My question was, how could anybody be an executioner? I don't know where that question came from. That's why I put the San Quentin image, because I was hearing a lot about what was going on in San Quentin. And at that time, my 15-year-old brain thought it was a job that someone applied for, that there was an office door with a brass plaque said executioner. And I thought, oh my God, how could anybody apply for that job? At that time, it was the newspaper. The internet wasn't even around until 1990. And so he said, well, you need to go and find people to help you answer your question. And I thought, okay. So then I cold called this guy, Michael Kroll, San Francisco journalist, Examiner, when that was around, San Francisco Chronicle, ardent advocate of abolishing the death penalty. He sat down with me. He took the time with me. I cold called him. He sat down with me and explained to me that, oh, no. It is not a job that one applies for. It is the very unlucky warden at San Quentin on the date and time of the execution who gets assigned to push the button that drops the cyanide pellet into the water that therein makes the gas chamber. And I thought, oh my God, I couldn't think of the trauma for that warden as well, not to mention, how are we letting this happen? It was astounding to me. And then Michael said, I know who you need to speak to next. And this person will remain anonymous. And this person transformed my life. This person was on death row in the 70s and got out on a series of appeals when the Supreme Court upheld the death penalty as unconstitutional in the late 70s. He agreed, and I convinced my Middle Eastern father of a 15-year-old only daughter to drive me and drop me off to meet this man who is now living in Marin at Zachary's Pizza. For all of the U East Bayers, if you know Zachary's Deep Dish Pizza on Solano Avenue, it was there then too. And my father dropped me off with a big clunky non-digital audio recorder. And I sat and had deep dish pizza and salad with this man. I will never forget it. I remember where we sat. And he was so generous. He shared his entire upbringing with me. A Chicano growing up in San Jose, he was a ballet dancer, very good ballet dancer, raised by his grandmother, had to make the choice between community, his brothers, gangs, or ballet. He chose his brothers, his community, his gang. He agreed to be driving the getaway car for what was supposed to be a robbery of a gas station that turned into a homicide. So he ended up driving away a car from a homicide. And all I could think about was how generous this man was and how trusting of me he was to sit with me, to share this with me. And all I could think was, what if he had had access to this in his community? What if he had had these supports? What if he had made a different choice? What if he had had a mentor? What if his community wasn't rife with intergenerational trauma and community violence? And so I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if it was going to be law, psychology, social work, education. I had no idea, but I knew that I was going to be committed to keeping young people out of the carceral system. So my next yes person was Dr. David McKernan at University of Illinois at Chicago. And so this went from 1988 to now 1998, when I started graduate school at University of Illinois at Chicago. David did community-based interventions for HIV prevention for gay men and partnered with CBOs, like real community-engaged research and partnering with systems and communities. And I said, I want to do this with children and families. I want to figure out how to develop family-based HIV prevention interventions, integrate mental health and substance use into those interventions. And I want to do it for young people who are coming into contact with the system, whether it was juvenile legal or child welfare. Fast forward, he let me spread my wings. And Dr. Larry Brown, who is still a mentor to this day, professor, child and adolescent psychiatrist at Brown, who I went to do my clinical psychology internship interview, where we then match for a year. We don't know where we're going to go. And I show up and there's 3 feet of snow in Providence, Rhode Island. And I think, no way am I going to be in another cold place. I'm coming back to California. And I went into his office and we had the most inspiring, passionate example of how a mentor should be in a conversation, where I said, here's what I'm thinking. And he made it bigger and bigger and bigger. Not bigger, like not doable, bigger and bigger and bigger in terms of being passionate and inspiring, and said, absolutely, bring your adolescent HIV prevention and family-based HIV prevention into the juvenile court system. Let's figure out how to do it in Rhode Island. It's a small state, we could do it statewide. So there you go, and 12 years later, I was Brown. 2015, I came to UCSF for my dream job as division chief of child and adolescent psychiatry, infant, child and adolescent psychiatry at the General, and brought my program of research with me. These are the other folks who are really mentor-mentees, because they are the ones who inspire me on a daily basis. These are the early career scholars who are part of the UCSF Juvenile and Justice Brain and Behavioral Health Mentoring Circle, which is what Dr. Saratan brought up. And I will say that one thing that my mentors have done all along is really teach me how to care. And Maya Angelou has a quote that I thought was so representative of everything that I've experienced in these mentors that have really changed my life. They say, in order to be a mentor, an effective one must care. You must care. You don't have to know how many square miles are in Idaho. You don't need to know what is the chemical makeup of chemistry or of blood or water or anatomy. I said that, Maya didn't. Know what you know and care about the person. Care about what you know and care about the person you're sharing with. And that really is at the core of our team, of our mentorship. And the larger box here is Dr. Erica Bath, who I was speaking to you about earlier, about the positionality statement. And we're intentionally co-leading this national mentoring circle. as an example of what happens in caring, flourishing mentor-mentee relationships. So what's ahead? I know that we were supposed to talk about challenges. And I will say that the biggest challenge, I think, for mentorship and for folks to think about is how we are going to support and renew and grow interest, continued interest among our young people to engage in academia, and in particularly for us in psychiatry and behavioral sciences, mental health career, as we face a significant workforce shortage, crisis, and increasing youth mental health needs. These 4 young people are incredible. They are young people who we hired as UCSF employees who have spent a year with us from the ground up, co-designing an app. They designed all the theme, they designed all of the design. It's called Foster Space. It's a one-stop app for mental health and wellness designed by and for youth in the foster care system, prior and current. All of these 4 amazing young people have current or past lived experience with foster care, and they have named themselves the Fab Four, the Foster Space Advisory Board, and they do peer coaching through the app for youth throughout the state up to age 26 who have contact with the foster care system. They can have access to a navigator and also direct mental health experience. This process of co-designing is what I challenge everyone to engage in. This brings youth to the table, elevates their voice. They are our greatest asset moving forward in all areas that we spoke about today. And lastly, I'll just talk about Change SF, which is another mentoring program, and talk about Sheroes down in the corner are the amazing women, 2 of whom were my nominators for this award. I'm so grateful. And Dr. Cheryl Davis, the director of the San Francisco Human Rights Commission, Nicole Elmore, the program coordinator at San Francisco Human Rights Commission for this initiative, and Mayor Breed, her Opportunities for All initiative. That's a workforce development for high school and college students in San Francisco City and County. They pay stipends for young people, and Change SF is a mental health workforce placement for them at UCSF in our Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. And they work with us for a year, and they're placed matched with mentors, 8 to 10 hours a week, exposure to research, education, clinical opportunities. And once a month, we have a mentoring circle, much like we do in our other national mentoring program, where they pick the topics, we find the presenters. And this particular one, coming full circle, our Change SF interns are going to do their own iSearch projects. And we're so excited. They had just the best time generating their questions. And I want to give you a couple of examples of their questions. One was, why do people become politicians? Another was, why do killers kill? Another, how does attending a predominantly white institution affect Black women? And another, how is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Psychiatric Disorders written? How do changes in that manual that psychiatrists and psychologists and other clinicians use to provide diagnoses, well, how does that affect the people with the diagnoses? You hear the community and the population piece. So I'll just close to say, to encourage everyone who's engaged in mentoring or teaching to think about this quote by Khalil Gibran, who is a Lebanese American poet, who said, "The teacher who is indeed wise does not bid you to enter the house of his wisdom, their wisdom, but rather leads you to the threshold of your mind." And with that, I just want to thank everyone for this award, and I'm so very grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
With that, I'll turn it back over to Meg. I think we have a few minutes for questions.
Well, thank you all again for both coming and for being on Zoom, but thank you all to our nominators and nominees for very inspiring talks and just representing what's best about UCSF. I think we have just a few minutes for questions if there are. I don't know if anybody online has any questions or someone here has some questions. Otherwise, I will invite you all. I think there's some reception right out in back. And I do again, thank you all for coming, and this sort of calls the end to our wonderful 2023 award ceremony. Thank you.